So everything we say will be recorded. So first of all, welcome to the supporters update. This is the July 2023 session. We've now been doing supporter updates every quarter for the last 3 years. This is like our third birthday because we started at the end of the summer term in 2020. Do some introductions for people. So those of you who don't know, my name is Debs McCann and I'm the Chief Exec of Woodcraft Folk. And this evening I'm joined by Tom, who can
Hello,
introduce
hi,
himself.
I'm Tom Brooks, and I'm one of the trustees of Woodcraft Folk. That's the main kind of hat I hold here. I'm also a group leader in Run an Elfin group in Southeast London in Lewisham, and I also sort of get quite involved in some of our big camps that we organise. I was involved in Common Ground, and I've been involved in a pre-camp for the Venture Camp that's coming up in about a month's time.
In about a month's time, we'll be there, indeed. And later this evening, we'll be joined by Jack Brown, who is also a General Council member. He's just finishing his group night in Banbury, but he's going to come and tell us all about Camp 100, Signal and everything else, all being well. These support updates are largely, as the name suggests, about keeping our members and our supporters updated with what's happening. We started doing them during COVID when we were all distanced, and we felt it was really important to let people know what was going on. And we like to think that we can try and enthuse you to get more involved in the organisation, but also to hear about the good work that's happening across the movement. Because in your local group and district, sometimes you can be very much involved in your local geography, but not necessarily know what's happening at the centres or in our projects, or even at a district in a particular region that may not be your neighbours. And it's also for staff and trustees to respond to questions from our members and supporters. So we do really mean it when we say interrupt and ask us questions. In this session, we're going to give you the latest news from our groups, our centres and our projects. I'll tell you a little bit about the work that we're doing around equality, diversity and inclusion. A little update around staffing and funding issues. Remind you about our annual general meeting that's taking place on the 10th of August at Venture Camp. And we'll end the session talking about Venture Camp and Camp 100. Camp 100 is the centenary camp that we'll be hosting in 2025. I'm going to hand over very smoothly to Tom, who's going to give you a little bit of our group news.
Yeah, we've opened some new groups, which is very exciting. So we've got some existing districts which have opened new groups. So we've got Leeds DF's group, we've got a Bromley Woodchips group, and Sheffield Derwent Woodchips. I hear many things about ex-Woodcraft people who I've known from a while, or sort of like Jack Brown's, who you'll meet later, his friends all seem to be moving to Sheffield. So I think there's a lot of positive energy and positive volunteers going into Sheffield. And so hopefully we can see a few new of them. I was very excited to see some of all of these new districts that are cropping up. Chesterfield Pioneers, Plymouth. Where is in Exeter? Nice. I'm glad you put the brackets in there. Good choice. Old Trafford Elfins and Pioneers. So that's another
Ray Valley. I didn't know where it was either. So it's between Exeter and Plymouth, apparently.
Is that one of the groups that Guy has been
supporting? Yes.
Supporting. Nice. Oh, great. Old Trafford Elfins and Pioneers. Do we know if are they affiliated to the current Manchester groups, or are they a completely new set of volunteers?
The Old Trafford Elfins and Pioneers are completely new volunteers. So They're working in a slightly different part of the city. They do have support from the Manchester district.
Nice. And a new group in York. Have we ever had groups in York before? I'm trying to think if I've ever.
We have had groups in York before, but not for some time. And again, New Year's work without looking up on the map. I didn't know where it was either. So I put York so that we'd all know where they are. Yeah. So there's quite a nice spread from sort of Plymouth and just outside Exeter down south. I mean, York isn't maybe the furthest north, but it's fairly north. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah, this is really positive. And then Hastings Woodchips and Hastings Elfins and Pioneers. Is that by Reborn? Is that a stopped during COVID? And
it stopped during COVID. That's right. Yes. So there was a small district there in 2020 that tried to reopen again in 2021 and didn't. And this year, some of the previous volunteers and also some Woodcraft Folk members who have relocated to Hastings have managed to set up 2 new groups, which is fantastic news.
Oh, is this Emma? Is this Emma?
Emma, Emma is one of them. Yes, yes.
Oh, excellent. Okay, so Paul will probably know, but Chris might not know. So Emma Shuttleworth is one of the volunteers who did the food for Common Grounds, the big international camp we did last year. And she was a very pivotal person in this, and she's got a newborn baby. And yeah, I know that she has like slightly moved and is ready to get involved in new Woodcraft groups. So I'm very excited to see her doing that, and that's great. Nice.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
us
very
too.
exciting. I think maybe that's the end of my bit. Unless, I want to. Is there bits that I should be saying? I'll go and check the.
There is, yeah. So while Tom was just catching up, there are also some new groups that haven't yet opened their doors, but the membership team are working with them. Some in new places. So
Gwyneth,
new
Argyle, McCuntleth, and Lewis. I think is how you
Lewis, yeah.
that.
So
Yeah.
Argyle is a completely new location for Woodcraft Folk.
Yeah.
And returning to Loch Winnock, we haven't had a group since 2020. And Lewis, again, it's been a few years since we've had an active group in Lewis. So that's really, really positive that people feel a little bit more settled post-COVID disruptions, and the number of new group inquiries are increasing, and the number of new groups inquiries that are actually turning into new groups with young members is also increasing. So that's really, really positive.
Yeah. That's really great. And we've got some training dates to plug if anyone fancies one, or maybe like knows people in their districts who would be interested. So these are presumably like group leader, like unless it says otherwise, I think with their group leader trainings. So
We're sort of encouraging them to be volunteer training, because we recognise that if we use the title group leader, that some volunteers feel a little anxious. But for those who've been on group leader training in the past would recognise the content.
Face-to-face training.
Yes,
In-person
face-to-face training.
Enjoyable volunteer-related training. And you can read what it says, but yeah, 8th of July in Bristol, so that's 2 days' time. End of August, going to Lockabrook, young leaders only. Then another St Pancras YHA, excellent use of the St Pancras YHA. End of September, and then we've got another one in Manchester. Maybe I could get some of my lot to
the one in September. That would be a really good idea.
New people who might be helping out with our group.
The observant people here will notice us using the Youth Hostel Association properties. We've started a new partnership with the YHA, which is giving us free access to all of their meeting rooms, but also providing a discount for any group who wishes to stay overnight at a YHA. Obviously, we would encourage you to come to a Woodcraft Folk Centre first, but we do recognise that some of our groups are quite a long way away from our centres. So if you're interested in finding out how you can stay with your group at a YHA with a 20% discount, contact the membership team and they can give you all of the details.
20%, that's not bad, is it?
It's not bad.
And you have to, presumably you have to like be as an official, you're coming with your group. It's not just like
yes, it's not as an individual. Yeah, no, it's for a group booking, unfortunately.
Fair enough.
And then the only other thing to say is that also if you have new volunteers in your groups and districts, we're running monthly volunteer induction sessions online, and to check out the calendar, which Tom has shared the link in the chat for when the next sessions the next one will be hosted by our head of centres, but will be an induction for all volunteers across the organisation, not just centres. And as I'm talking about centres, I want to celebrate something. We have seen a step increase in bookings at our centres, which is fabulous. Obviously, COVID heavily impacted bookings at our centres as we closed them rather quickly overnight, and it was more than a year before they were able to host residentials once more. But we are really pleased to say that by the end of May this year, our bookings were higher than the total of 2022, which is really, really positive. If you haven't been to one of the Woodcraft Folk centres, I highly recommend you make a booking. We've been investing money at Highgate, and really pleased to say that there are beds at Highgate for the first time in 20 years. So please do take a look at the centre website page and find a place to stay. From a financial sustainability point of view, we're also really pleased that the average value of bookings has also increased. Some of this is as a result of the investment that we've been making into staffing. So this year we employed for the first time an activities coordinator at the Biblins Youth Campsite. And what we're seeing is groups coming and staying for longer on site and engaging in activities actually on the Biblins site, which not only is it great to see young people enjoying that space, but actually if they're doing their activities on site, they're spending less on transport and having a smaller impact on the environment during their stay. So that's really, really positive. The other news, and Tom will have seen this more regularly than me, is the Cudham renovations. Some of you, if you've been to a supporters update recently, will know that we got some national lottery funding to do some work at Cudham, and these is a collection of pictures of Cudham in disarray, but being put to right, I think, as well as taken apart by some of the volunteers, including Tom's mum in the middle. I felt I had to include Ross in her overalls doing something. It would not have been possible without the support of volunteers. And I really have to say a big, big thank you to Kevin and Dick from Walton District for their support. Dick, I won't say how old he is, but he's quite mature, spent a lot of time in this roof space sorting out the wiring. It was discovered to be a bit like spaghetti. So we're really, really grateful for the volunteers giving their time to make it beautiful. I've got some after photos.
Yeah, and this is my experience of it, because we used it maybe 3 or 4 weeks afterwards. My group went in, and I guess as far as we're concerned, it was all pristine and lovely and brilliant, and all worked exactly as we wanted. And the main thing that was great is it's now got 4 extra beds, and it's got a 6. It's got a few different sizes, which is convenient for it's really useful.
So the renovations were developed in partnership by having some discussions with the people who were using the centre about what could work better, and what we've been able to do is we have changed the 2 smaller bedrooms in the middle into bathrooms, which groups are telling us is more convenient because young people don't have to travel so far if they want to go for a wee in the middle of the night. We've installed sensor lighting that comes on when you move, and therefore people don't leave the light on all night long. And as Tom said, we've been able to turn some of the old bathrooms, which were barely used after the extension that was done probably 6 years ago, into slightly bigger bedrooms. So we're really, really pleased with that. So there are extra beds, there are new showers, and we've been able to install LED lighting. We've been able to use, I think the term is a back flush toilet, where the hand washing water gets used to flush the system. And as well as that, we've put in a lovely zonal control heating system, which means that we can choose to heat the bedrooms or the activity centre, but we don't have to heat both at the same time, particularly when one is empty. So that's really, really positive. So go and take a look. It's all been given a fresh fresh coat of paint and new carpeting in some areas at least. But it looks all fresh and clean. The other thing to say about the centres is that they've been working on their decarbonisation work, and the decarbonisation working group has produced an update for the annual general meeting about what's happening across the movement. Work was slightly delayed during the COVID periods, but we're really pleased that the centres are all now working on trying to look at how they can reduce their carbon emissions. And that includes some really dull but very essential insulation in the roof at Highgate, looking at additional solar panels at Biblins, an introduction or reintroduction of composting at Lockerbrook, who've also developed a low carbon menu for use of school groups who use the site, and have increased their level of on-site activity, very similar to Biblin's, trying to keep groups on site to reduce the amount of transport around the local area when they get there. But that's all positive. There is still more to be done. And I'm sure if you join us for the AGM, you will hear the discussions about climate change and how we can also support our camps to reduce their carbon emissions. I'm going to hand back to Tom to give us a little update about some projects.
Yes, so we've got Camps for All. So in case either of you two don't know, so so during COVID, there was a big push amongst Woodcraft to enable people to join from a distance. Like people might live in a place where there's a group that they don't have a group nearby, and they might want to be involved in Woodcraft, and so they often got involved in like lots of our online activities, which we pushed out during that time. And lots of those people would really like to come and camp with us. And so over the last, maybe I'm going to say year and a half, when did we first do? There was definitely ones this time 2 years ago.
Yeah,
Yeah, year and a half, maybe 2 years. We've been
yeah.
running Camps for All, which are sort of run by a mixture of, they often have, so in this picture, for example, there are two staff members, although one of them might not have been a staff member at the time. And sometimes we have volunteers. So we have ESC volunteers. We might have some different types of volunteers in the future. So a kind of mixture of staff and volunteer-led camps for young people across country, but also I think they're sort of open to any Woodcraft Folk young member. But I guess they're sort of largely as an aim to solve the problem of if you've interacted a lot with Woodcraft online, but don't have a district nearby and you'd like to go on a camp. So I think they've been pretty successful.
They have, and one of the audiences that we've managed to engage is those young people who perhaps grew up in Elfins and Pioneers, but in their district they don't have an active venturer group. So the camps have been supporting sort of 12 to 15-year-olds. So it's been really lovely seeing those young people who would have left the organisation because there isn't an active venture group in their area, mixing with young people who are also new to the organisation or maybe have engaged in some of our project work. So I attended the last one at Highgate, where there was a large percentage of young people from the Co-op Academy Trust schools that we've been working with, together with some young people who had been involved in the organisation as younger children. So it was really, really positive. So there's some dates in your diary.
I just realised Sammy from my group is in this photo. Is DJ the adult
Yes,
back?
yeah.
When was this? I didn't. When did
That was February.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How did DJ sign? DJ's such an odd character. He seems to like appear and disappear, and I
You
don't know.
do know what you're saying is being recorded for everybody.
Well, great.
Okay. We're really grateful that DJ volunteered.
Oh, good. Excellent. Yes, and so we're also running this campaign, No Child Left Behind, with the National Education Union, and we can see Aggie, our chair, who went up to London and did some protesting. To me, that looks very much like outside number 10, outside the Cabinet Office. So it's a childhood poverty campaign started in August 22. And yeah, look, it says at the bottom, on the 28th of June, not that long ago, Aggie was out there campaigning with the NEU.
There was about 40 odd different organisations who presented a petition and a declaration that actually the government needs to be doing more to address childhood poverty, and particularly making a call for free school meals, as is said by the poster that Aggie is holding there. And Woodcraft Folk have been one of the original partners in this campaign, and we're really, really pleased because the NEU has also become an affiliate to Woodcraft Folk. So that we are supporting each other to get that message that actually childhood poverty is not good enough, and that we need to do more to make sure that no child is left behind. So thank you, Tom. I had a great day. I can tell by she's smiling. And I just wanted to also share a little bit about the work that Woodcraft Folk is doing around equality, diversity and inclusion. For those of you will be aware that the current strategic plan for Woodcraft Folk is all about increasing and widening participation. So more young people and a greater diversity of young people, as well as more volunteers and a greater diversity of volunteers engaging in Woodcraft Folk. A working group of staff, volunteers and external advisors has been created. It was set up shortly after Common Ground, who have been looking at what Woodcraft Folk can do to reduce those barriers to participation. The working group has decided that if it was to tackle inclusion across the whole organisation, it would stretch itself too thinly and would have less of an impact. So it's currently focusing on how we can reduce the barriers to participation by volunteers, making the assumption if we make it easier to engage a greater diversity and more volunteers, we'll have more capacity and more connections to different communities to increase the number and diversity of children and young people benefiting from the organisation. And they've started by doing some demographic monitoring of staff and trustees. This summer, they will be doing some demographic monitoring at Venture Camp, and we'll be rolling that out to events throughout the autumn and ultimately doing that across our volunteer workforce in the new year. And it's really interesting because whilst I think we can all be honest and say that we are not diverse enough in our engagement of ethnic minorities and people of colour, actually there are lots of ways that Woodcraft Folk is probably more diverse than we can see. So the number of staff and trustees who describe themselves as having a disability was actually much higher than any of us had assumed. Those who are living with health conditions that impact on their lives or having caring responsibility for others, again, was much, much higher. We were already aware of our higher than average levels of neurodiversity, so that one was less of a surprise, to be honest. But it's really important that we do this demographic monitoring to understand who is involved in the folk and how we can address and support those who are underrepresented. So I did, we felt that being open and accessible to all has been a huge priority for Woodcraft Folk over the years. And we've concentrated in doing that to be more inclusive of children, maybe doing some outreach work such as the playouts or the school-based work that we're doing. But it felt that we weren't really changing the culture or really tackling the issue sustainably. And therefore we are trying this time to focus on those volunteers, because we really strongly believe we need more volunteers. With more volunteers and a greater diversity of volunteers, we'll have more skills, more connections and more capacity to engage more children and young people. I don't know if anybody has any particular questions about the EDI work, but don't be surprised if you start hearing more statistics shared about our engagement levels. And don't be surprised if you're at an event, somebody asks you to share us anonymously demographic information. Of course, all participants have the opportunity to say they prefer not to tell us, but that in itself is also quite interesting. So watch this space, because in September we are going to do some work with an external advisor to help us truly understand the barriers that exist for potential volunteers in this organisation, which we will use to inform the next strategic plan that Woodcraft Folk launches in 2025. I think we've just been joined by Jack as well. Thank you. It's me again. Sorry, I thought I was handing back over to you, Tom. So this is a little bit about staff update. This is Jo. Jo left us a couple of months ago after 5 years at Highgate. She never got bored of that view, but she did tire of driving up and down the track. So Jo is going to go and work with a refugee support agency in Sheffield. Because we've said goodbye to Jo, we're now going to be saying hello to a few others. Claire will be joining us as the new Lockerbrook Centre Manager. Unfortunately, Andy, our centre coordinator at Highgate, is also leaving us this month, and he will be replaced by Hannah and Wes, who are going to job share that role, who are also starting later this month. It's been a bit of a change. We also said hello in terms of staffing to Carmen earlier this year, who joined us as a trainee funded through the Heritage Lottery Fund as a programme called New to Nature, which is all about supporting young people in developing their careers in the environment and green sector. So there has been some real positives in the staff. It's always sad to say goodbye to some, but it's always lovely to welcome new people with new ideas and new energy into the organisation. So if you see Claire, Hannah and Wes, do say hello and give them a big Woody's welcome for me. A little bit of funding news, and then I will hand over a little bit later to talk about camps to Tom and to Jack. So we were successful in getting some extension funding from the Scottish Government, which has meant that we've been able to retain Fleur, our Scottish worker. Fleur is our longest serving member of staff, and if you're ever in Scotland, I'm sure you've had the pleasure of meeting Fleur. We've also managed to get some co-op group funding and a little bit of other funding from DCMS to extend Elaine's role as the green influencer. Elaine has been working for the last 2.5 years in Bradford and Leeds, supporting young people to design and develop their own green social action, particularly targeting young people from disadvantaged communities. And it's been really positive to create relationships with the Co-op Academy Trust through her work as part of the Green Influencers Scheme. Other new funding news since our last update. We were lucky in March to attract some DCMS, and I use DCMS off the top of my head. It's the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport, and UK Youth, which gave us some funding for Ventures Away from Home, which funded a number of residential experiences for over 100 young people during the Easter holidays. We were also involved in the Bromley Holiday Activities and Food Programme, targeting primary age children who have 3 school meals. So it's an opportunity to give Woodcraft Folk experiences to children and people new to Woodcraft, and also tell them a little bit about the Bromley groups and how they can get more involved in Woodcraft Folk after the end of the holiday programme. Other bits of funding news, we were able to get some BBC Children in Need funding via Think NPC, who are a think tank who have worked with the membership team to engage our young members in doing a piece of research about the impact of their priorities about what government and funders should be doing to address the climate emergency. And that report is being launched next week. Unsurprisingly, our young members thought the government weren't doing enough. They thought that maybe Woodcraft Folk was doing more than their schools and other organisations that they worked with. But they made a real request for Woodcraft Folk to do more educational work about ethical consumerism. And the membership team are working on those activities at this very moment, and will share it with groups at the beginning of autumn. So watch this space. I'm going to head over to Tom to talk about V Camp, who's recovered now from the pre-camp at the weekend, but over to you.
Yeah, so spent last weekend helping the team plan, get everything ready and get all the kit and decide where villages are going to go and all the sort of exact sort of thing. Yeah, so headlines are, it's beginning on the 5th of August for 7 days. So it's a Saturday to Saturday camp. It's mythology themed. And in fact, I've been involved in designing and buying some T-shirts, which have got nice little mythology designs on them. It's all very exciting. We've got guest speakers coming in. There's lots of fun program as always at Venture Camp. We've got the Peace Union. We've got Extinction Rebellion coming. People from the Green Party, the Forestry Commission, the Green and Women, Stop Funding Hate. We've got a lot of people coming. So we've got over 400 adults and children. So more than we had at the last time we did a Venture Camp like this back in 2019.
And numbers are still increasing.
Is this more people still booking?
Yes, since I did this slide, we've definitely had more people, cool. Which is really positive.
Yes, absolutely. And like, especially given it's been quite a tumultuous time for Woodcraft Folk over the last like 3 or 4 years, to have a event that we're doing now that's bigger than it was in 2019, I think is incredibly positive. And also we've changed the way that we're trying to fund some of these camps going forward. So we've got £5,000 of distributed access funding to reduce the financial barriers on camp. We've also changed our financial policies to make it cheaper for volunteers to come on camp, which I think is a positive step forwards. Yeah, so several changes for Venture Camp, and it's a really exciting thing, and I'm really looking forward to being there in a month's time with lots of other great woodcraft people in a big field,
So
as summers should be spent.
Just to add to what you were saying there, Tom. So for those of you who come to these supporters updates regularly, you'll remember the December update when we were promoting the Christmas challenge and asking people to make donations. During the December supporters update, we raised over £2,500 in that hour, and this £5,000 that has been distributed as part of the access funding was raised during the Christmas challenge. So if anybody is listening to this who gave to that fund, thank you very much. You've been able to support children and volunteers to attend. Tom mentioned that for Venture Camp, we've had a reduced price for volunteers, recognising that they're giving their time and their energy, and for some of them, they're stopping earning money whilst they volunteer to look after other people's children. We will be evaluating the impact of that, but it's really positive to see that we've had quite a large number of volunteers come forward to support that camp, and the number of volunteers is increasing. I have to say the number of young people is also increasing, which is positive. The other thing, I don't know if you want to say about...
Yeah, Hugh Hickman, you may know from General Council, is and two other people. I don't know their names. Two other people. So three people are canoeing to where are they actually starting? Are they going from
Hay on Wye?
Hay
So
on Wye? So
they're going to travel the whole length of the River Wye. They are going to do it in 2 kayaks and a coracle.
Nice.
Which I can't wait to see, because my understanding is
as in the coracle that's at Biblin's, that coracle.
Yeah, that coracle.
Excellent.
I understand coracles are quite difficult to steer. So they are starting their journey at Hay on Wye, will be arriving into Biblin's on the 4th of August, so the day before. Although I am tempted to send them upriver and make them arrive on the 5th, just so that we can all welcome them. They will be staying with us on site for the duration of camp, and then at the end of camp we will be saying goodbye to them as they paddle down to the sea to finish off the length of the Wye, which I understand is about 100 miles of paddling, which is a really, really great challenge. And they're doing this to raise a little bit of money, because unfortunately we're a little over budget for Venture Camp. We've seen, as we've all seen in our own houses, a real increase in the cost of food, and it's a little more than we have budgeted for, but so we're hoping that we can get a little bit of last minute funding, either through sponsoring Hugh, and we are approaching a number of our historic supporters and donors to see if they're able to help us out. We're also really pleased to say that Unite in Leicester are sponsoring some of the programme, and we have an artist and performer coming to do a session on the Friday with our young members, all funded by Unite, which I believe Paul, who's on the call, probably may have heard more about that on a local level than I know here on a national level. So thank you, Paul, if you had anything to do with that. I'm gonna, I think, invite back to come and tell us about Camps for All, Camp 100. I've forgotten which camp it is. Camp 100.
Yes, so my internet's a bit shaky, so if I drop out, that's why. In 2025, Woodcraft will be 100 years old, which is an incredible thing. I remember at one of the symposia around Woodcraft's history a couple of years ago, a talk which looked at lots of other cooperative socialist youth organizations that had existed over the past 100 years, but that hadn't existed for quite some time now. And it's incredible that we are still going and that we are still doing new things and engaging new young people. We want, though, this celebration of those 100 years to also be looking forward. So for Camp 100, one of the big things that we're trying to do is think about the next 100 years and what woodcraft looks like and what the world looks like and how our children and young people can engage in that and shape that and develop the world they want to see going forwards. As one of the other things along with that is we'd like to see Camp 100 be a real step up in how we support our volunteers to put on these incredible events that no other organization does the events the size we do with the very limited staff capacity that we do. And lots of that often relies on volunteers doing huge amounts of work, as I'm sure most people listening to this tour will have done at some point. But something we want to do as a step towards changing that culture to something a bit more sustainable, where people support each other and work together in a slightly different way. We want to make sure that everybody has at least a day off during camp, partly as a way of shifting that culture, meaning that people aren't as dependent on them burning themselves out to make the camp happen. We've got a team with lots of brilliant volunteers, some of whom have been involved in national camps before, and it's really positive that lots of people who'd been involved with Common Ground had a really good experience with that and wanted to keep going and being involved again. But also with lots of people who've not been involved in big camps before. And I'm looking forward to talking to some of the people who've been involved in Venture Camp about how they've found that experience and either advice they have and things they'd like to share, but also whether some of those want to get involved in some capacity going forwards. We've got quite a lot of young people. We've got an accessibility team, which is something we haven't had before. There was a really, what sounded like a really positive meeting around accessibility at Common Ground, which had a number of recommendations. And I was really excited today to see popping up on the Venture Camp Discord a discussion around rest stops for people with mobility needs who are walking along the site and designated spots for that. So it's really nice to see concrete things and concrete changes to how we organize these camps to make them work much better for all sorts of people. We'll be going back to Cowmarsh Hall in Northamptonshire, the site of Common Ground. We learnt a huge amount doing Common Ground about how to put in the infrastructure and create a camp on a site which is quite as bare bones as that. We've not done a camp that big on a site with that little infrastructure for a very long time. And there's a huge number of things that we can, in some cases, change quite significantly, and in some cases, make minor tweaks that will make the camp a lot smoother for everyone. We have various social media accounts that are on the slides. Look at those. You can also email info@camp100.org. And yes, it's going to be really exciting. I'm really looking forward to it.
Do you want to tell people about the 100 Jack?
Oh, yes. The 100 are a set of approximately 100, I think, at this point, although it will inevitably go up, as these things do. Challenges to do with the number 100. So that might be, and those are challenges that people could do maybe in their group nights, that children who are part of the organization could do individually, that they might do with other groups. And there are all sorts of things. So there could be writing a 100-word story to do with one of our aims and principles. There could be rolling 100 sixes in 100 seconds at the beginning of an elfin session, which sounds mad and chaotic, and I still need to take some dice in to do it with my elfins. It could be walking 100 miles. It could be raising £100 to support your district to go to Camp 100. It could be learning how to say hello in 100 different languages. There's a really nice one that I think some would really enjoy, which is thinking about 100 changes, their manifesto of 100 changes for the next 100 years. I think some groups could have an amazing time coming up with that kind of thing. I think it's the kind of thing that I'm hoping not only will generate a bit of a buzz and enthusiasm about the camp, but that will also really support groups' program and enable them to tie it into some of these things that we're doing more generally. And later, when we realise that we need, I don't know, there's all sorts of I think there's strength in 100 straighten 100 tent pegs, which I'm sure lots of groups will be very pleased that some of their young people might be keen to go and straighten lots of tent pegs just before they're getting ready for camp. We're going to have some specific hundreds challenges for Venture Camp as well, which we are, I think, going to have a bit of time working out on Monday.
Thank you, Jack. I think the 100 hundreds is inspired, and I can't wait to be involved in some of those. You mentioned tent pegs. I don't know if anybody else saw the mountain of tent pegs pulled out of the ground after the Glastonbury Festival. It was amazing. I did think about they would be useful, and maybe we could have done with maybe more of them at Common Ground. But anyway, thank you, Jack, and thank you, Tom. We've reached the end of our presentation, so it's really an opportunity for any of our guests to ask questions. I know from previous editions of the supporters update that people prefer to ask questions once I've stopped recording, so I'm going to stop recording and